I'm back from a little bit of travelling. I've been to Omagh and I made a very short video there which I'm going to post here in another couple of minutes. And I've been to Belfast and I've been to the coast, a little bit of a jaunt. And the reason why I'm starting the video here in my bedroom with this beautiful patchwork quilt is that this is something that I made years and years ago. I'm thinking it was sometime around 1992. And this is a quilt that I started in a time of sort of frugality, if you like. It was a time when there was very little money, very little comfort in my life, and I decided that I would do a patchwork quilt. Now, I was doing a lot of sewing at the time anyway, and I was doing little craft fairs and making all kinds of efforts to support myself and my children. And this quilt was one of many that I made. And it's just so, it brings back so many memories to me. I picked it up from my daughter's house, my youngest daughter, because it needs a little bit of repair. And she said, Mum, you hold on to that now for a while, because I'd actually given it to her. And there's a few little bits needed here to repair, which I shall get on and do. But oh my word, it has brought the memories back. Yeah. Patchwork quilts are filled with memories. I think that was the initial attraction of them. You know, you'd normally make them with little bits of material from clothes that you had or from coverings you had, and they became very sentimental. And it's inspired me maybe to make another quilt. Gosh, I did so enjoy doing that. And it kept my mind off other things, worries that I had at the time. I can't begin to tell you how wonderful it is though to be home. I left on Wednesday morning of last week. This is Monday evening. And I could hardly drive fast enough to get back home. There's something incredibly fulfilling and healing about being at home. And the bird song that greeted me was amazing. So I'm here in Omagh. This is my hometown, and I've just come out of the Sewn Arts Centre. It's been a fantastic evening with jazz, catching up with a few friends, and look at this living wall. Isn't that brilliant? I'll just put the camera back a wee bit. Imagine you can actually plant up a wall. You just do a close-up. And then if I just turn around, this down here is the River Strool. There's a little footbridge over there. And believe it or not, the time is, let me just get this right, the time is 10:15. Isn't this beautiful? So those are the salmon falls over there. And you can see the river above the falls is very still. Beautiful landscaped grounds here in the culture centre, the arts centre in Omagh. Of course, a lot of this was put together, you know, after the terrible Omagh bombing and the consequences. It was the biggest single bombing in the Troubles in Northern Ireland. So just going down the steps now. It's just lovely to see the appreciation of the greenery. Just look back up towards that beautiful living wall and the moon. When I was up in Omagh, I met a very good friend of mine who I went to school with, and we went into the old school grounds where we both attended Loretto Convent Grammar School in Omagh, and absolutely beautiful grounds. I mean, now they're so developed with all the beautiful trees and my friend said to me, you know, this is probably where you got your love of trees, because of course I grew up in a little house with no garden and in a very treeless area. But it was interesting walking around the school grounds. They're very extensive. They must be probably 5 acres, maybe more. It's hard to tell, because some of the trees are so massive, and of course it just makes the land that they're in now seem so small. But it was so stunning. Well, no, that's not the right word. I wasn't stunned, I was shocked. It was so shocking to see what had happened. And it led me to think about society and civilization, as we call it. In the old school grounds, because it was a convent, the nuns had their own little cemetery, their own little graveyard. And it was quite beautiful. It was a beautiful, contemplative place. And although, as well you know, I have my issues with religious orders, etc. But this place was a sanctuary. It was a sanctuary that was so important to students like myself. Where I lived, there wasn't a shred of greenery. So to go through the beautiful wrought iron gates of the convent grounds, as we call them, it was like entering another world. So it really shocked me when I went looking for the nuns' graveyard. Not that I knew any nuns in particular who would have been buried there, but I was intrigued to see what had happened during all the years that had passed between me being a 16-year-old girl and me being a 66-year-old woman. And what was terribly sad was that there was no graveyard there. And all the old, the sports ground, the tennis courts, they were all languishing in disrepair, had become overgrown. Now this is an incredibly central part of town that I'm talking about. The convent is a very what's the word I'm looking for? Valuable piece of land. And the graveyard wasn't there because all the nuns, I learned from speaking to someone up there, all the nuns had been, their bodies had been disinterred. Had been moved. Can you imagine that? And the graveyard was just flattened. In fact, they'd been disinterred fairly recently because the ground was still quite disturbed. There was nothing growing there. Now, I suspect, as you would probably have concluded by this point, that the land is going to be sold. And so it led me to think about these precious places where we bury our loved ones, and how they can become of so little importance as time goes by. And it just led me to come back to this theme that I've always felt was so important, which is woodland burial. And it's made me even more determined to ensure that at some point, when that time is near, that what remains of me goes into a woodland burial to nourish trees. I think it's probably well, no, not probably, it absolutely is the best way to do something with one's remains. But who'd have thought? I mean, when I was at school, you know, the nuns were so important in the community. Who would ever have imagined that their remains would not be lying in peace? That there would come a time when their remains became irrelevant in the face of money and building and power and development. Who would have thought it? And one more little thing before I go. Let every weed have its day. Look at the beauty of this. This is ground elder, the bane of so many gardeners. But I just let it flower each year because it's so gorgeous. Beside the fuchsia, which is almost wild in itself, and the geranium, which has climbed up through to a height of about 4 feet, through the fuchsia and through the ground elder, to make sure it too has its day in the sun. Isn't it beautiful? This sea of white amidst the green and the red and the pink and the orange of the euphorbia.